Alright, so today we're working on the rollback project. This is a truck that belongs to a friend of ours. We're helping him by taking the rollback bed off of his truck with a bad motor and putting it on this truck. The double frame is done. Now we're working on suspension. The first thing we have to do is we have to deal with the fact that the centering pin on top of the axle is offset. It is 2/3 of the way back. We need a centering pin right in the center for the Airliner suspension that we're using. So the way I'm going to overcome this is I'm going to make a bracket. I'm going to take a piece of angle iron, big heavy 5/8 angle iron, and I'm going to drill a hole that will accept that existing centering pin and drill a new hole and create a new center pin that will work with the Airliner. It's going to take just a small amount of work. I know I could just cut the pin off and weld it. That's not what I want to do. I just want to make the bracket and then everything can bolt together. So I'm going to cut a lot of this out and we're just going to show you the end product and you'll understand where we're going, because there's a lot of measuring and checking and fitting and all that, and you guys don't want to see that. Now I'm on to the suspension. For those of you that skip around the video, maybe you missed it, we're not using the spring suspension, we're putting an air ride suspension on it. So this is the frame from the truck. So what we've done is we have the frame put in here, and this is the passenger side crossmember turned around backwards, as you can see, if I could put the camera where it belongs. So it's turned around backwards so that we can utilize all of the bolt holes. This is our center of axle matched up, squeezed into place. Now we have a double frame, so we have to take that into account, that this frame is now higher. So we took a box tubing across the bottom of this, cleaned it up, squared it on there, same thing on the front, a piece of steel going across, and this sits on here so we are correctly in line with the original frame. That's where we want to be, because if we change that, it'll change our pinion angle. The farther we go away, I mean, it's minor, but it has an effect. So now we're going to transfer the marks. These are 13/16 holes we have to drill. I believe those are 11/16 shock mount, airbag mount. Those are bump stop, whatever. There's a little bit to do. It's not really a big deal. The only thing that is different on this is we have right here, the track bar mount. We have to put that on and mark it also, because it goes from this side over. It doesn't really matter. You could do either way, whichever way you prefer. I'm just going to go back the way it was. The brake lines come in on this side, so we'll make our bracket on this side of the differential. So we'll come from here, look where I'm pointing, from here over to here. So now I'm ready. Let's transfer some marks. All we're going to do is take some paint, spray in the holes, and I'll take a pick and I'll circle the holes. I don't have a transfer punch big enough, so we'll circle the holes, pull this all down, and drill it. I know somebody's going to say leave it in place and drill. That's a lot of cleaning. It's a lot of mess. It's just far easier to do it the way I'm going to tell you. Alright. Airbag holes, shock mount, bump stop, front leaf spring hanger. Looks like I got to go back to the 13/16. I didn't go through the second frame on that one. Well, that's unfortunate. I thought I was done drilling on this side. Anyways, guess I better get back at it. The air suspension is all in. It's all bolted up. I've got the ride height set correctly. I'm working on the panhard bar, track bar, whatever you want to call it. And I am getting measurements from my Freightliner, which has the same identical suspension on it, so that I can set that track bar the way it's supposed to be at ride height. And now I have to build a bracket to come off of the differential to tie that into. And on mine, it is turned at this 30 degrees. It's not straight up and down. So that panhard bar doesn't go straight up and down. It kind of goes away with the way it's set on an angle like that, being like this. When it swings, it's going to swing longer, just like the rear end's going to do. It's going to go farther. It's going to arch, and that's going to arch with it to a point. So now I'm working on the panhard bar, and I can't use the mount from the other differential because it's way too short, because this one
the pinion is offset 2 inches, which is very common. It's offset 2 inches this way. The other axle, it's offset 4 inches. So when you offset that 4 inches, the hump is clear over here, which makes this bracket shorter. So it wouldn't work. I had to make a bunch of spacers and crap underneath it. This is what I preferred. So I took 2 pieces of truck frame, because that's what this is, and I made these 2 matching mounts. This is exactly 1 inch between the two. They will weld to the truck frame. I'm sorry, to the truck frame will weld to the axle. I mean, obviously I got to clean it all up, and then I've got stiffener brackets to go in. So these are my cardboard templates. One will go, I don't know if you can see that. It matches the profile of the axle, and that will help keep it from moving this way. And this one is going to do this. And then up here, we're going to have to put a bend in it right there, because I want it to go up here also. I got the new airbags in. I've got them plumbed up here just to a fitting, just so I can cycle the axle up and down. I want to make sure that we are perfectly centered, and when you cycle the airbags up and down, it's easier to move the axle back and forth and then set it where you want it. Constantly checking, rechecking, blah, 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 so on and so forth. Now, I put a fitting on here. I use this little air regulator, pressure regulator, and it takes literally about 5 pounds of air pressure, 4 to 5 pounds of air pressure to lift this frame. So this is going to work out pretty well, hopefully. A few issues I had, you know, I had to make the spacers to change, make the brackets to move the center pin. I had to cut the bleeder screw because there was shock interference right there. The bleeder screw was about that much longer, really unnecessary. There's plenty of head right there to get onto, so I had to cut that. And same thing over here. I'm probably going to cut that one a little bit more. I was being a little more conservative, trying to leave as much of the bleeder screw as I could. Let's see if I can close up for you. Right there. But I think I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off because I don't want that shock banging into it. I still have a cross member that needs to go in here, but I don't want to do that until I have I'm ready to set the bed on or know how we're going to address the cross member back here for the pivot pin. So I wasn't happy with the 1/4 inch plate.
He's torch cutting a 1 inch plate of steel. He's cutting out a bracket or something like that, and he can't use the plasma cutter because it won't cut 1 inch. Guess we need a bigger one or something. We usually don't cut 1 inch though, do we? It's not real common.
No, rarely cut it this big. Just using a straight edge to try and get it as close as I can, save me a bunch of grinding later. I had a problem with my torch, as in I ran out of oxygen. And in the middle of it, it made some really jagged cuts, so I'm cutting out a whole new bracket so I can have a nice cut to work with. And I'm cutting the center out of this. It goes around that torque arm mount. It goes into it. And, I started with a pilot hole. I drilled a pilot hole so it would be a much cleaner cut.
You didn't even hit it yet, did you?
No.
I didn't think so.
No. Alright, now I have one last cut to cut this piece off. You just hope that after you've cut this that your layout was right. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
And true to form, it may be one of my builds. It's just one of scrap steel, right? Very important to hold this thing as straight up and down as you can so you don't get crooked cuts. Like the torch cut coming through will be at an angle. And the smoother I am with the torch, the less grinding I'll have to do. We all love grinding, right?
I hate cleaning up the grinding dust.
Get back to just gonna fall on my toes.
Alrighty.
Well, it's still warm. That cool. There's our bracket. Well, there's our rough cut bracket. Put it in the vise, let it cool, and I'll grind on it.
He's welding up the brackets that he made now. He got these two parts done, and he's starting on the back side now.
So hard to see in here.
I'm sure.
And I can't reach it, so I'm sure this will be easy to play.
He's having trouble getting in there to reach it. It's kind of far back.
It turned out better than I thought it would.
Oh, that's good.
But it's hot.
All right, so this has been on hold for quite a while. I've been waiting to find the right parts because I didn't want to have to go buy new parts, because if you remember right, we're doing this to help a friend, and we are trying to keep the cost as absolutely low as possible. So what we did here is we needed that panhard bar, so I made this bracket. They were typically on a leaf spring suspension. We don't have that, so I had to make this. So what I did is I mimicked, and I may have said this earlier in the video, but this is quite a bit later, so I'm going to repeat myself. I mimicked this at ride height, what the Airliner suspension was for that torque arm, what angle it was at, what it looked like, and then I copied the bracket. Now, the bracket that was on the other differential stopped here, but it was thicker and it was cast. So I went ahead and brought it up the rest of the way to tie these two together, so we hopefully won't get any bending or twisting here, which I don't think that'll happen. And then I used 3/8 truck frame, and I made brackets for all 4 of these here and here to help keep it from doing this and like this. So now what I need to do is get a ride height valve, an air valve that will keep this at a constant height. So what I'm going to use is a leveling valve off a Freightliner truck I bought for parts. I'm taking it off of there, and it is what's called a pilot dump, which means it uses a smaller air line from the cab that supplies air to the valve and then dumps it. Typically, we don't have 125 pounds of pressure in these bags, but the supply air coming back can be 125 pounds. So that overcomes that diaphragm and lets it empty out. So that's what we got to do today. Again, it's used, so we have to mount it to the frame and get it to build a stationary point on the axle, and then put a connecting rod between the two that can pivot. So as it goes up and down, it can pivot. Okay, so here's a bracket I whipped up real quick, and I chose to do this so we'd have the strength of the bend and then shorten it up to what we need. I'm not sure what length we need exactly. It can't be lean in forward or back. I want it to be straight up and down, so I got to find straight up and down, and you can see how that shock leans back a little bit. This side does the same thing, so I have to basically figure out where those 2 holes need to be in here, because they're going to be offset, one way or the other, which that's leaning back, so it's going to be like that. All right, so my bracket's in, and I have the ride height valve, leveling valve, whatever you like to call it, installed. Now, the next step is I have to put a stationary pivot point on the differential. And I've got this set up so I'm just offset from the plug, the fill plug. And what we have to do now is get this to ride height. Now, this is an important piece of the puzzle is we establish ride height early on when we made this bracket. Okay, and how that torque arm is set. I set it the way this suspension was in the truck that it came from. So what we're doing now is we're going to bring it up to ride height. Once we're happy everything is back to where it was the way I wanted it set up, then we're going to create a pivot point on the rear end. Okay, shop air into just a small pressure regulator into the 2 lines that are going to the airbags. Now we are completely dumped right now, and I want to demonstrate the effect that ride height has on your pinion angle. All right, so right now we have a negative pinion angle, meaning that pinion is pointed down. The drive shaft is positive coming up. Can you see how that is pointed down? Now what I'm going to do is put air to the bags and watch the pinion angle change.
right. A little more. All right, there is, it's hard for you guys to see, but I don't know how well it showed up. But now we have a positive couple degrees of pinion angle, which is what we were after. So perhaps I can let this out and show you. All right, it's going to deflate now. So every piece of the puzzle has to be correct, because otherwise it just throws everything off. So I'm going to put it up to ride height and put my blocks in between the bump stop and the axle, and then we're going to set where the pivot needs to be. All right, so now we're ready to set this. Now, this doesn't look level. The concrete isn't level. I've laid a straight edge across the top of the frame, and the truck isn't level. So what we have to do is be relatively level. We have to be the same measurement here as we are here to this piece of steel going across the frames, because that gives us a reference line to go from, and that tells us where we want our pivot to go. I know the sunlight's, kind of hurting things here, but it is what it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to weld a bolt on, and I chose a longer bolt so we have that smooth shank, and then we'll cut it off past the nylock. We're going to use a washer too, but we need to get a location. So we're going to use this for our pilot control for our dump valve. Again, small airline controlling a much larger airline. So what we're going to do is find a way to mount this. I'd like to mount it up and down instead of sideways, just because, just for the mental, it'd be like, when you flip it up, you got air in. When you go down, it's going down. Not ideal, but there's already a hole right here, so I'm thinking about mounting it just like that in the dash, because I want it somewhere like this. So if you come out to load something, you're like, oh geez, I forgot to dump the airbags. Come back up. You don't have to get in the truck like most other trucks. The air suspension valve, the diff lock, and the fifth wheel slider are always like in the middle. So we put it over here. You don't have to get up in the truck. You can reach it from the ground. Okay, so I cut the hole out. I end up using a carbide bit, and then I got it roughly the shape I wanted. Then I used the file and fine-tuned it until it was nice and tight. I'm not going to shove it in all the way because I still got to hook the hoses up, the airlines. I just Sharpied over that writing for right now. I'd like to have something to go in here that says up and down, but probably not going to get it. So I had this line laying around, so I'm going to reuse it. It was new old stock. This I went and got. This is for the dump valve. I ran it all the way up. I've got all my airlines ready to go. I just haven't decided where to mount this little air tank. All right, so I've mounted the air tank to the frame, and this is the small line that goes up to the dump valve, and then it comes back to the rear to dump function on the leveling valve. This is the air line that goes back to the leveling valve to feed the airbags. Our supply from the compressor will come in right here. I can't finish this because the compressor is going to be in the toolbox. It's going to be mounted on this side, and I don't know where exactly it's going to go yet, so I have to hold off on that. Otherwise, it's done. I don't have it zip tied up and protected like I want yet. It's just going to have to wait until we get everything with the bed in here, because I still have to tie the brake lines up, and I'm not doing that until the bed is on, and I'm sure none of my bolts are going to be in the way. All right, so back here, everything works as it should. The rod works out well. The leveling valve works good. This is a nice gradual sweeping 90 here. This one's okay, but I think I'm just going to go ahead and change this out to a 90 like I said earlier, and that'll just take a little bit of
strain off of this quick to leak. So next, there is one thing left back here in this conversion that hasn't been done, and that is I need a cross member right in this area to hold the frame where it belongs. The problem is I can't do that yet because I need to get the rollback bed back here and find out where exactly we're going to cut the frame. So until I can do that, this is as far as we can go. So we're going to call the air ride suspension conversion finished, and we're going to move on to the rollback bed. So that's it for this part. Next part will be taking the rollback off the old truck and putting it on this truck. If you guys like what we're doing, give us a thumbs up. If you haven't already, hit the subscribe button. Leave your comments down below, guys, and we will catch you on the next one.